White cop disrespects black CEO in court, regrets it instantly after learning her true power. The courtroom buzzed with restrained murmurs, the kind that echoed off polished wood and beneath fluorescent lights. It was Monday morning at the Fulton County Courthouse in Atlanta, and Judge Howard Givens' docket was already backed up. Bailiffs moved quickly, attorneys shuffled papers, and defendants lined the benches like nameless faces in an endless procession. Among them sat a woman who didn't belong in any ordinary courtroom bench. Jordan Miles sat straight-backed, calm, her posture precise. She was dressed in a charcoal blazer with a silk collar, no jewelry except for a smart gold watch, and her heels were modest but stylish. At 42, she exuded confidence, not the kind that shouted, but the kind that required no announcement. Her short, natural curls framed a face that was both composed and quietly formidable. She looked like she was analyzing every square inch of the courtroom, not out of fear, but out of focus. What no one around her knew was that Jordan Miles was the founder and CEO of Monarch Global Technologies, one of the fastest-growing AI firms in the U.S., contracted with both Fortune 500 companies and multiple federal agencies. She had been named one of Time's Women of the Future. But today, she was not here for business. She had come to quietly sit in on a civil rights hearing, one concerning the wrongful arrest of her friend's teenage son, Jamal, whose case had been suspiciously buried. Jordan had financed the legal team anonymously, but she hadn't expected what would happen next. Court officer Mike Redford had been assigned to courtroom security that morning. A white man in his early 50s, with a barrel chest and a chip on his shoulder, he had served in law enforcement for over 2 decades. But his understanding of respect had always been selective. To him, Jordan Miles was just another well-dressed black woman taking up space where she didn't belong. He noticed her almost immediately, sitting too comfortably, not looking intimidated, looking him directly in the eye when their gazes met. That irritated him. Redford approached. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said gruffly, eyes narrowing. "Courtroom seating up front is reserved for legal parties and press." "You need to move." Jordan blinked, confused but calm. "I'm here with the family. I was asked to sit close." He scoffed. "I didn't ask who you were with. You're not counsel, and you're not press. Move to the back." "I'm not obstructing anything," she said, still seated. "And I haven't disrupted court proceedings in any way." Redford stepped closer, lowering his voice but increasing the hostility. "I said move. Don't make me ask again." Jordan studied him for a long second. "Is this about seating protocol, or is there something else bothering you today?" The officer's jaw clenched. "Is that sarcasm?" "No," Jordan said. "It's a legitimate question." People nearby had started paying attention. A few heads turned. Redford's ears burned. How dare she challenge him? "In front of others?" "That's it," he snapped. "Get up." "You're out." "You're escalating something that doesn't exist," Jordan said, standing slowly. "You don't have cause." "I don't need cause to remove someone being non-compliant," Redford barked. "You're disrupting court decorum." "Come on." Before she could reply, Redford grabbed her elbow, not roughly but firmly, and began leading her toward the exit. That's when Judge Givens, presiding from his bench, noticed the commotion. "Officer Redford, what's going on?" he asked, annoyance rising in his voice. Redford replied loudly, "This woman refuses to comply with seating protocol. She's being removed." Jordan turned toward the bench. "Your Honor, I was simply sitting in support of a friend's family and was told to move for no just cause. I'm not being disruptive." But Givens had already made up his mind. "Then follow the officer's direction. You'll be allowed back once you comply with courtroom order." Jordan inhaled deeply, trying to suppress the heat in her chest. The courtroom watched, caught between curiosity and discomfort. and Redford, savoring his moment, escorted her all the way to the hallway. The moment they were out of earshot of the court, his tone shifted. "You people think you can strut in anywhere you want, dress fancy, talk slick," he muttered. Jordan stopped walking. "What did you just say?" "You heard me," Redford said, now squarely in her face. "The law don't care how much money you flash around or what kind of attitude you bring. Don't think I won't cuff you right now if you keep mouthing off." Jordan's voice lowered dangerously. "You just threatened to arrest me for sitting in a courtroom. You put hands on me, and now you're using racist dog whistles. Are you sure you want to keep going?" Redford smirked. "Lady, I've been doing this job longer than you've been breathing. I know when someone's bluffing." Jordan reached slowly into her inner pocket and pulled out a slim leather card holder. She opened it with precision. Inside was her federal clearance badge. At first, Redford didn't register it, but then he read it. And read it again. His face paled. The color drained from his neck. Jordan's voice was razor-sharp now. "Read the agency line out loud, officer." Redford's mouth was dry. "Central Intelligence Agency. I'm on the National Security Cyber Operations Task Force. I consult directly with the Department of Justice and am on quarterly briefing calls with Homeland Security. Do you have any idea what happens when a CIA-affiliated federal contractor is harassed and manhandled in a courthouse by a uniformed officer?" He tried to speak, but nothing came out. Jordan stepped closer. "I've got your badge number, and so do my colleagues. If you think this ends here, think again." Redford took an awkward step back. I didn't know. That's the problem," she said. "You didn't care, until you realized who I was." Jordan turned and walked away, her heels clicking like a gavel across the polished floor. Back inside the courtroom, murmurs grew as word began to spread about what had happened. Judge Givens looked toward the door as if something was off. And it was. Because the woman who'd just been escorted out wasn't some nobody. She was someone with enough power to upend every person who had just tried to put her in her place. And the reckoning had just begun. The hallway outside courtroom 3B was dead silent now. Jordan Miles stood by the window, arms crossed, her reflection in the glass showing nothing of the storm that simmered beneath the surface. Her wrists still ached from where Officer Redford had gripped her. It wasn't pain, it was principle. Behind her, the double doors to the courtroom creaked open. "Ma'am?" A young black attorney stepped out, looking concerned. His name tag read Eric Harrison. "I saw what happened. That was way out of line." Jordan turned slightly. "You were in there?" He nodded. "I was sitting 2 rows back. I've seen some ugly moves in court, but that was straight up disrespect. Everyone saw it, and they saw you handle it like a boss." She didn't smile. "Not yet. I'm filing a formal complaint," she said, her voice low but solid. "Internal affairs, the Bar Association, and a separate civil action if it comes to it." "But not just for me." Eric raised an eyebrow. "Not just for you?" Jordan looked back toward the courtroom. "The boy. Jamal, the kid this whole hearing was about. They're trying to bury his case under paperwork and bias. And if this is how they treat someone like me, imagine what they're doing to him." Eric exhaled slowly. "You know his mother." "She's a friend," Jordan replied. "I've been helping cover legal costs." "Off the record. Until now." He tilted his head. "So what now?" "Now," Jordan said, straightening up, "they get to learn who they tried to push out of a courtroom." Meanwhile, inside the courtroom, Officer Mike Redford had returned, his swagger noticeably absent. He took his post against the wall, trying to act unbothered, but anyone paying attention would have noticed his shifting weight, his flickering eyes, and the light sheen of sweat on his brow. Judge Givens glanced at him. "Issue handled?" "Yes, Your Honor," Redford lied through his teeth. But the judge was no fool. He'd already caught whispers, and he knew enough about Jordan Miles to know this wasn't going away quietly. Back outside, Jordan's phone buzzed. It was a secure line. She stepped away to answer. "Miles," she said. "Jordan," came the voice of her handler, CIA Liaison Director Julia Marks. "We just received word through the DOJ that you were detained in a courtroom." "Is that accurate?" "Unofficially detained. No charges. Just a thug with a badge and a bruised ego." There was a pause. "Do we need to step in?" "Not yet," Jordan said. "But I do need access to certain court records, and I need you to put quiet eyes on Judge Givens." "He's not the problem?" "Not directly. But something's off. This isn't just one bad cop or a single incident. I want to know why Jamal Thompson's case was never picked up by the public defender's office. And why 2 months of surveillance footage from his arrest is missing." Marks hesitated, then said, "You're not operating in a classified capacity right now." "I don't need to be," Jordan said. "I'm acting as a private citizen, who also happens to know where the pressure points are." A beat of silence. "We'll run a soft sweep," Marks finally replied. "You'll have files by morning." Jordan hung up. Back in the courtroom, Judge Givens called a recess. As the room emptied, Redford tried to slip away unnoticed. But Jordan was waiting by the exit. "Officer Redford," she said, stopping him cold. He froze. "You and I are going to have a formal sit-down with your superior this week. I've already requested your body cam footage from this morning, and you may want to start thinking about what you're going to tell your union rep." He opened his mouth. No words came out. "And one more thing," Jordan added. "If you ever put your hands on another black woman for simply taking up space, I promise you, whatever fallout you're about to face right now will feel like mercy." She walked away without another word. Redford stood there, cold sweat crawling down his back. Later that night, in a small conference room at Monarch Global's private office in Midtown Atlanta, Jordan laid out everything she had compiled so far. Alongside her were 2 of her closest allies, Maya Bell, her legal strategist, and Ethan Lowell, a former federal prosecutor turned private investigator. "They didn't just mishandle Jamal's arrest," Maya said, pointing to the case timeline on the whiteboard. "They rerouted the complaint internally before it even reached the state's intake system. Someone's trying to erase this case." "And look here," Ethan added. "The officers involved in Jamal's arrest? Same precinct as Redford, same squad. One of them has 3 prior excessive force complaints, none of which were prosecuted." Jordan leaned back in her chair, her mind working like a chessboard. They didn't just arrest that boy. They planted something. Or doctored footage, and now they're trying to make him look like a threat so they can justify what they did. "You think it's a pattern?" Maya asked. Jordan nodded slowly. "No, I think it's a protocol." There was silence. Ethan cleared his throat. "You gonna go public?" "Not yet," Jordan said. "First, we expose them the way they tried to expose him. Through the system. In court. On record." And then she said the words that would set everything into motion. "I'm not just going to defend Jamal. I'm going to dismantle every last person who helped bury the truth." She closed her laptop with a snap. "Let's get to work." Jordan Miles sat in the back seat of a black SUV, parked half a block away from the Fulton County Courthouse. Rain tapped against the windshield, blurring the city lights into soft smears of orange and blue. Inside, the cabin was dim and silent, save for the quiet hum of encrypted laptop fans beside her. On the screen, A file pulled hours ago from a back channel within the DOJ's internal database. She scrolled through it slowly. Incident reports, officer rosters, tampered timestamps. And one phrase that made her blood run cold. Flagged for high priority redirect. No outside review permitted. They'd buried Jamal's case on purpose, and someone higher up had helped. You seeing what I'm seeing? Ethan's voice came through her earpiece. He was watching from a camera feed across the street. I'm seeing a conspiracy, she replied. Someone wants this whole precinct's corruption locked down tight. He paused. We sure it's just about Jamal? Jordan didn't answer right away. Her eyes flicked across a secondary report, an internal complaint filed 2 months earlier by a different young black man. Beaten during a routine traffic stop, his complaint was closed in 48 hours with no follow-up. His name was Deshaun Green, and he disappeared off the record 2 weeks later. I think Jamal was just the one who didn't vanish, she said finally. I think we're looking at a pattern that's been operating under the radar for years. Ethan's voice hardened. You ready to go public? Not yet, she said. Not without video. She turned to Maya, seated beside her, already pulling up a directory of body cam metadata. There, Maya said, pointing at the screen. Redford's cam stopped recording 3 minutes before he reached Jordan in the courtroom. It only picked up audio until then. Then it cuts. Let me guess, Jordan muttered. Technical glitch? Maya nodded. That's what the report says, but look at this. Backup audio started at the exact same second, as if someone wanted audio but didn't want the image. Jordan leaned in closer. So the microphone was live, but the camera wasn't. Maya smiled grimly. They wanted deniability. No one would believe a cop just disabled the body cam in a federal courtroom, but if it's accidental... Jordan's hands clenched. Let's see how accidental it feels in court. The next morning, Jordan returned to the courthouse, this time not in the gallery but at the plaintiff's table. She wasn't just assisting now. She'd filed a civil rights suit against the city's police department, naming officers Redford and Griggs, Judge Givens' courtroom deputy, and a John Doe supervisor for covering up systemic abuse. She walked into the courtroom like she owned it. And in some sense, she did. She didn't flaunt her title, didn't need to. Her presence was enough. Opposing counsel looked rattled before they even sat down. Judge Amelia Grant, presiding over the suit, adjusted her glasses and addressed the courtroom. Ms. Miles, representing yourself? Jordan stood. Representing myself and the interests of a minor unjustly detained and publicly degraded, Your Honor. The opposing attorney, a wiry man named Donovan Kessler, rose. We believe this is an overreach. Ms. Miles was never charged. Her account is based on personal interpretation. Objection, Jordan cut in smoothly. Facts, not interpretation. I have audio recordings, multiple witnesses, and missing video data that conveniently supports my claim. Unless Mr. Kessler has a different definition of overreach. Judge Grant gave Kessler a look that shut him down mid-rebuttal. The first witness was called Jamal Thompson's mother, Yvette. She walked up slowly, hands trembling slightly as she was sworn in. Jordan approached with care. Mrs. Thompson, she said gently, when was the first time your son told you about the officer who assaulted him? Yvette swallowed. 2 days after it happened. He didn't want to talk at first. Said he was scared they'd come for him again. Jordan nodded. And had you received any formal notice of the arrest? No. I found out from a neighbor who saw it happen. Jordan turned to the judge. No documentation. No court hearing. No charges. And still he spent 48 hours in a holding cell for resisting arrest. Resisting what? Judge Grant asked quietly. Jordan's gaze sharpened. That's the question, Your Honor. Kessler objected again, his voice rising. There's no direct connection between my clients and this unrelated arrest. Jordan interrupted him once more. Oh, but there is. She clicked the remote in her hand. On the courtroom screen, an audio file began to play. It was grainy, low volume, but clear enough. Redford's voice, unmistakable. I don't care who she is. Black lady in business clothes talking back in court. That's all I need. A hush fell across the room. Even Judge Grant blinked. Kessler tried to respond, but Jordan wasn't done. She turned back to the screen and played the second clip. This time, it was Officer Griggs. We're told to keep it quiet. If the higher-ups get heat, they'll pin it on us. Just do the file scrub and move on. Jordan let the silence sink in before she spoke. These aren't technical errors. They're strategies. And they've been used to target black residents under the guise of procedure. The judge leaned back slowly. I'll be issuing a court order to preserve all remaining footage and open an independent investigation. Kessler stood, eyes darting nervously. Your Honor, this is a public hearing. Grant cut him off. And the court is very interested in transparency. As the session ended, Jordan packed her briefcase and turned to Maya, who was smiling now. You dropped a nuke in there, Maya whispered. Jordan's voice was quiet but steady. I'm just getting started. Outside, a reporter caught up with her. Ms. Miles, any comment on the suit you just filed? Jordan paused, then faced the camera. If this city thinks it can bury the truth beneath paperwork and silence, they haven't met me yet. I'm not just fighting for Jamal. I'm fighting for everyone who's ever been handcuffed by a lie. She walked away, heels clicking sharply on the courthouse steps. And behind her, the system began to tremble. The courtroom was still humming with tension from the last hearing when Jordan returned the following week. News of the explosive audio had spread beyond the courthouse, stirring local media and social justice organizations into action. Now, every move she made was shadowed by flashing cameras and whispering reporters, but she walked with the same composure and focus that had always defined her, even before the world knew her name. Inside, Judge Amelia Grant had called for a preliminary evidentiary hearing. The city had requested a dismissal of the case, citing insufficient grounds for systemic claims. Jordan knew better. She had enough evidence to not just reject the dismissal, but to pull back the curtain on a network of corruption stretching far beyond 2 rogue officers. Her suit wasn't just about the abuse she'd endured. It was about what they had tried to hide with her arrest. And she was about to make that very clear. As she organized her notes at the plaintiff's table, Maya whispered from beside her. Are we sure about this file? She asked. Once we use it, there's no going back. Jordan nodded. That's exactly why we're going forward. Across the room, Officer Redford sat stiffly in a dark gray suit, eyes glued to the table in front of him. Officer Griggs was absent. His attorney claimed emotional distress had kept him from appearing. But it wouldn't matter. Today wasn't about their faces. It was about what they'd done. The bailiff called the room to order, and Judge Grant looked out over the crowd before speaking. We're here today to determine whether sufficient evidence exists to proceed with the civil suit brought forth by Ms. Jordan Miles against the Atlanta Police Department and affiliated defendants. She nodded toward Jordan. Ms. Miles, you may proceed. Jordan stood, her presence commanding yet understated. She didn't pace. She didn't raise her voice. She simply stepped forward and spoke like a woman who knew every word mattered. Your Honor, last week I provided audio recordings of 2 officers discussing how and why I was targeted in court. Today, I intend to show that my case was not an anomaly, but part of a broader, intentional pattern of racial targeting. Judge Grant gave a slow nod. You have the floor. Jordan clicked the remote again, and a new video began to play. This one wasn't from a police body cam. It was security footage from the courthouse basement, pulled from an access request Maya had filed under a legal tech exemption. On screen, Officer Griggs could be seen speaking with an unknown man in plain clothes. Then, as the audio kicked in, the room froze. You sure she's just a lawyer? The man asked. She's got money. Looks like one of them boardroom types, Griggs replied. She ain't local. That badge might scare her a little. She didn't scare easy today. Then make her. Silence. You want me to plant something? The man didn't answer, but he handed Griggs a small plastic bag before turning and walking out of frame. Jordan paused the footage and turned back to Judge Grant. This video was captured 2 hours before I was arrested in open court, and moments before my handbag was moved by Griggs without consent. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Even Judge Grant's expression hardened. Jordan continued, I didn't bring that video last week because I needed to verify the man's identity. His name is Gregory Chase. Former APD, currently working under contract for the city's private security vendor. He's also under investigation in 2 unrelated tampering cases, both dropped without explanation. Opposing counsel jumped to his feet. Your Honor, this is highly speculative. It's supported by 2 digital timestamps, sworn affidavits, and a signed visitor log from courthouse security, Jordan cut in. And I have all 3 right here. She handed over the documents without missing a beat. This isn't about one bad day, Your Honor. It's about an organized effort to discredit a black professional woman, because I spoke back. Kessler, visibly rattled, tried again. This is a distraction. Ms. Miles is creating a narrative to avoid accountability for her behavior in court. Jordan's reply came swift and cold. I was arrested for standing still, for asking questions, for wearing the wrong skin in the wrong courtroom. There was no behavior, just silence, and that was too loud for them. Judge Grant sat back, silent for several long seconds, the weight of the moment settling heavily over the room. Ms. Miles, she said finally, the court acknowledges the serious implications of the new evidence. Your motion to proceed is granted. The request for dismissal is denied. We will move forward with the discovery phase. A murmur of approval rippled through the gallery. As court adjourned, Jordan gathered her files, her hands steady. Officer Redford walked by her table, his steps faltering. For the first time, his arrogance had cracked. You're not done yet, he muttered. Jordan looked up, locking eyes with him. Neither are you, she replied. But I'll still be standing when it is. Outside the courthouse, the sky had cleared, sunlight pouring through the high-rise buildings of downtown Atlanta. Reporters rushed toward her, microphones raised, but she kept walking until she reached the car where Maya and Ethan were waiting. Next move? Ethan asked. Jordan slid into the seat. We press harder. Maya turned from the driver's seat, a flicker of nervousness in her voice. There's talk that someone from the state AG's office is getting involved. They're worried about how deep this goes. Jordan stared out the window for a moment, then smiled slightly. Good, she said. Let them be scared. They should be. And as they drove off into the fading afternoon light, she knew something had shifted. This wasn't just about court anymore. It was about exposure, truth, and power. And this time, the system wouldn't be the only one watching. The night after the hearing, Jordan sat in her living room with the lights low and the television turned down. She wasn't watching the news, though her face was on nearly every channel. Instead, She was staring at her own reflection in the darkened window, processing everything she'd just set into motion. The discovery phase was only the beginning. What she'd revealed in court was enough to shake the foundation of the case, but what she planned next would rock the entire department, and she knew that meant she had a target on her back. Maya sat across from her on the couch, a stack of manila folders between them. "We've traced Chase's employment history," she said. 3 years ago, he was dismissed from APD for an internal misconduct charge that was mysteriously dropped. 2 months later, he's working with Sentinel Solutions, a private firm with heavy city contracts. "Of course," Jordan murmured. "City hires out the dirty work to maintain deniability." Maya flipped open a folder. "But here's where it gets messier. Sentinel has ties to a local nonprofit that receives federal funding for urban safety initiatives, the same nonprofit that runs pre-arrest diversion programs and supplies unofficial security training to off-duty officers." Jordan looked up sharply. "Meaning?" "Meaning the city is outsourcing its policing, using shell orgs and community partners to funnel influence without oversight. That Chase video, he's just the front man." Jordan stood, pacing. "So they set me up in that courtroom, knowing full well I had no priors, no threat history. It wasn't just retaliation. It was a warning." Maya's voice dropped. "We also found a report. Internal APD memo from last year. Lists you by name. Flags you as a potential agitator due to public appearances and social media content related to civil justice reform." Jordan stopped in her tracks. "I was being watched?" "You weren't the only one." Jordan rubbed her temples. "They built an internal enemy list, like a blacklist." Ethan arrived moments later, his laptop open before he even sat down. "I've cross-referenced everything we've got with APD's past settlements. Over the last 5 years, the city's paid out more than $20 million in civil claims involving unlawful arrests, most of them against black plaintiffs. No media coverage, no trial, just buried in sealed agreements." Jordan raised an eyebrow. "And how many of those involve the same officers?" "Too many to be coincidence. Riley, Griggs, Chase. Even the judge who dismissed the wrongful detainment charges in 2019, she has 2 unexplained case closures linked to similar defendants." The dots weren't just connecting, they were forming a noose. Jordan leaned in, voice firm. "We need to go public, a press conference, not just about my case, but all of them." Ethan hesitated. "Jordan, that's war." "I'm not scared of war," she said. "I'm scared of silence." 2 days later, the conference room at the Hyatt downtown was packed. Journalists, civil rights attorneys, community leaders, all gathered after word leaked that Jordan Miles would make a major announcement. Behind her stood a blown-up image of the video still, Officer Griggs accepting the planted evidence. Next to it, a screen displaying payout figures and sealed case numbers. Jordan stepped to the mic. 2 weeks ago, I was arrested in open court, not for breaking the law, but for daring to challenge the abuse of it. What I've uncovered since then is not just about me, it's about a system weaponized against its own citizens." She outlined the blacklisting, the false arrest pattern, the shell companies, each point punctuated by a photograph, a document, a statistic. "These are not isolated incidents. These are coordinated operations, and they target people who look like me." A voice from the crowd called out, "What do you want?" Jordan didn't miss a beat. "Accountability, transparency, prosecution. I want every officer, contractor, and official involved in this operation investigated by the Department of Justice, and I want every victim to know they weren't alone." The room erupted in applause. Later that evening, while reviewing footage from the conference, Jordan received a phone call from a blocked number. She debated ignoring it, but something in her gut told her to answer. The voice on the line was distorted. They're scared, Ms. Miles. And when they're scared, they get sloppy. You're about to get a file delivered. Read it, then decide if you want to keep playing nice. Before she could respond, the line went dead. 15 minutes later, a courier dropped off a thin package with no return address. Inside was a USB drive and a typed note. You think it's about cops. It's bigger than that. Jordan plugged the drive into a secure laptop. The file contained a single video. Surveillance footage, not from a courthouse, but a private residence. The grainy time-stamped clip showed Officer Griggs at a backyard party with several men in suits. One of them was a city councilman. Another, a sitting judge. They clinked glasses. Laughed. Passed a folder. It was the same file that had been planted in her bag. Jordan leaned back in her chair, her mind reeling. This wasn't just corruption. It was collusion. As the screen faded to black, Jordan whispered to herself, "They don't even know what's coming." Because the courtroom wasn't the only battlefield now. The city itself was under scrutiny, and she was just getting started. The following morning, the city seemed to breathe differently. Headlines across digital platforms screamed in bold fonts, "CEO Jordan Miles accuses police department of systemic collusion." News anchors debated whether her claims would trigger a federal probe. But while the public was only beginning to wake up, Jordan had been up all night, piecing together the final move. In her penthouse office overlooking downtown Atlanta, she stood before a whiteboard covered in names, arrows, and red lines. Maya sat beside her, tired but wired, reviewing the new footage again and again. "This isn't just a few rogue cops," Maya said quietly. "It's a web. Politicians, judges, law enforcement. If we go after this, we're going after everyone." "That's the point," Jordan replied. "They're not hiding anymore. They think no one has the power to stop them, so we're going to make them visible." Ethan walked in holding 2 cups of coffee and a thick envelope. "This just arrived at the front desk." "No name, but the handwriting's the same as the one from the USB package." Jordan took the envelope carefully and peeled it open. Inside were photocopies of internal communications from the mayor's office to the police union. Email threads. Meeting notes. It was all there. Coordinated retaliation tactics against political critics. One line in particular sent a chill through the room. Target high-profile disruptors. Use minor infractions. Plantable evidence preferred. Create headlines first. Defend later. Jordan's fingers tightened around the page. "They were planning it. Not just me. Anyone who challenged them." She took a deep breath and turned to Ethan. "Set up a meeting with the U.S. Attorney for the Northern District. Today." "I'm not handing this to the media. I'm handing it to the people who can put these bastards in federal prison." 3 hours later, in a quiet corner of the DOJ's Atlanta field office, Jordan sat across from U.S. Attorney Monica Jameson. A sharp, straight-talking prosecutor known for her zero-tolerance policy on corruption. Jameson scanned the evidence slowly. Then she leaned back, tapping her pen against the folder. "This is the kind of material that brings down entire administrations," she said. "But if I move without airtight backing, the blowback could kill the whole case. I need testimony." From someone on the inside. Jordan already had the answer. She pulled out her phone, scrolled to a name, and handed it to Jameson. "Call him." Officer Anthony Delgado. He reached out anonymously 2 nights ago. Said he'd been part of a raid targeting innocent residents in West End. Told to keep quiet or be reassigned. Jameson raised an eyebrow. "You trust him?" "I trust fear, and Delgado's terrified." Later that night, under protective surveillance, Delgado met with Jordan, Maya, and Jameson in a secure warehouse-turned-safe house on the edge of town. He looked young, too young to be carrying the weight of betrayal on his face. But his words were steady. I didn't sign up for this. I joined to protect people. But Chase, Griggs, even Lieutenant Voss, they're part of something else. They get tips from outside the department. Real estate developers, political consultants, they arrest people in specific neighborhoods to depress property values. Then those same developers sweep in and buy cheap. Jordan sat forward slowly. So this is about money too. It's always about money, Delgado said. They didn't just want to silence you. They wanted to send a message to every activist, every business leader, every reformer that stepped out of line. You were a trophy. Jameson took detailed notes. Would you testify under oath? Delgado hesitated, then nodded. With protection, yes. Back in her condo later that night, Jordan leaned against her balcony railing, the city lights flickering beneath her. For the first time, it didn't feel like she was at war alone. A quiet knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. She opened it to find her father, retired Judge William Miles, holding a newspaper and a bottle of scotch. I figured if the world's going to burn, we should at least have a drink while it happens, he said. Jordan smiled faintly and let him in. They sat on the couch, clinking glasses. Her father flipped the paper around to show her the front page. A photo of Jordan standing at the press conference, her hand raised, her face defiant. The caption read, "One woman's truth shakes the system." He looked at her, eyes proud but wary. This isn't just courtrooms and speeches anymore, Joe. This is a revolution. Are you ready for what comes next? She took a sip, then met his gaze. I don't have a choice. But I do have a plan. Outside, the sirens wailed distantly. Helicopters buzzed faintly above the city. Somewhere, the empire that had orchestrated her fall was trembling. And Jordan Miles was about to bring it all down. The federal courthouse in downtown Atlanta had never been more tense. Reporters clustered outside behind metal barricades, cameras rolling live, capturing every arrival. Inside, the halls buzzed with anticipation. Courtroom 4C had been reserved for a special evidentiary hearing, one that no one had expected to be public until a certain black woman decided she was done being silenced. Jordan Miles arrived flanked by her legal team and Maya. She wore a navy blue pantsuit, tailored to precision, with her natural curls pinned up. No security detail, no theatrics. Just presence, authority. She moved like someone who had already won, but was determined to earn every inch of justice anyway. As she stepped into the courtroom, whispers rippled through the gallery. Prosecutors, public officials, and members of the press all craned their necks. Officer Chase and Officer Griggs were already seated at the defense table with their attorneys, both men looking pale and hollowed out. There was no trace of the arrogance they once wore like armor. The judge presiding over the hearing, Hannah Raymond Ellison, was a no-nonsense federal judge, known for his sharp tongue and sharper sense of fairness. He glanced at the docket, adjusted his glasses, and gave a slight nod. "Ms. Miles," he said. "Are you ready to proceed?" Jordan stood. "Yes, Your Honor. We will begin with our first witness, Officer Anthony Delgado." There was a pause in the room, a slight gasp from the defense table. Delgado had disappeared off the radar weeks ago, supposedly placed on desk duty after requesting leave. No one expected him to appear today, let alone to testify. Delgado walked in through the side door, nervous but resolute. He took the stand, was sworn in, and began recounting in painful detail the directives he'd been given, the red flags he ignored, and the chilling meetings he'd attended in hushed rooms with men like Chase, Griggs, and even a local developer who needed that neighborhood cleared. "What did they tell you about Jordan Miles?" Jordan's lawyer asked. "They called her a problem, said she was too visible. That someone had to remind her who's in charge." Were you ordered to fabricate evidence? Delgado nodded. We were told to find something, anything, and if we couldn't find it, make it look close enough. Gasps echoed in the room. The judge leaned forward. Do you have documentation to support this? Delgado looked at Jordan, then reached into a folder and passed it to the court clerk. Meeting logs. Email chains, audio snippets I recorded on my personal phone. I was scared. But I couldn't be part of it anymore. When the judge reviewed the contents, his brow furrowed deeply. These aren't just unethical, these are felonies. By midday, the mood had shifted completely. More witnesses were called. A retired officer who had also received hush money offers, a city hall staffer who confirmed that Jordan's name had been circulated on an unofficial watch list, and finally, a whistleblower from a private PR firm hired to manage the fallout once Jordan's arrest made headlines. It was a setup. Every angle. Every inch of it. Officer Griggs's attorney tried to shift blame. My client was misled. He didn't know the full scope of... Jordan interrupted, standing slowly. Permission to speak, Your Honor. Judge Ellison paused, then nodded. Jordan turned to the room. I was framed, publicly humiliated. I was made to look like a criminal in front of an entire courtroom, not because I broke the law, but because I refused to bow. I've spent my life building a company that employs over 500 people, donates millions to underserved communities, and advocates for criminal justice reform. That's what they hated. Not what I did, but who I am. She turned toward Chase and Griggs, her voice ice. You didn't just try to break me. You tried to send a message. But today, the only message being sent is this. Your system is crumbling. Griggs couldn't look her in the eye. Chase fidgeted, his face blotched with sweat. Judge Ellison cleared his throat. In light of the evidence presented, I am referring this case to the U.S. Attorney for formal criminal prosecution. Officers Chase and Griggs will remain in federal custody until the next hearing. As the courtroom erupted in motion, media stormed the hallways. The truth wasn't just out, it was undeniable. Back in the hallway, Maya rushed up to Jordan with tears in her eyes. You did it. Jordan didn't smile. She exhaled. No, she said, we just started. Because while Chase and Griggs were going down, there were more names on that whiteboard. And justice wasn't about one courtroom. It was about rewriting the rules, once and for all. The sun rose quietly over Atlanta, but the city itself was anything but calm. Word of the explosive courtroom revelation had spread like wildfire across social media, national broadcasts, and political circles. News anchors debated the scope of corruption. Editorial headlines used words like systemic betrayal and images of Jordan Miles, calm, composed, unshakable on the witness stand, dominated every screen. But for Jordan, the media frenzy meant little compared to what came next. The day after the hearing, she stepped into a conference room atop her company's skyscraper headquarters, greeted by applause from her executive team and silence from many others who once questioned her leadership. Her face was solemn but firm. We survived, she said simply. Now we build. By noon, indictments had been filed against officers Chase and Griggs for obstruction of justice, falsifying police reports, and conspiracy to violate civil rights. More surprising, however, was the arrest of Deputy Mayor Harris Caldwell, the one who had once dined with Jordan and smiled for photos at her community grant awards. Turns out, he had signed off on the funding for the private security firms and cleanup teams used to displace residents in Jordan's redevelopment neighborhoods. Not for public safety, but to clear space for corporate developers who had been quietly lobbying City Hall. As the federal investigation deepened, new names surfaced. Real estate tycoons, city zoning officials, and 2 judges from the lower circuit were all implicated. What started as an act of police misconduct had unraveled an entire network of collusion between law enforcement and power-hungry businessmen, using fear and prejudice as leverage. One by one, they were brought in, questioned, charged. Meanwhile, Jordan's own staff struggled to keep up with the outpouring of support. Thousands of emails, letters, and calls poured in from around the country. Messages from Black professionals who had faced similar disrespect, from single mothers who had once lived in the very housing projects Jordan rebuilt, from young women who now saw her not just as a CEO, but as a symbol of power wielded with grace. At a press conference held on the steps of the federal courthouse, Jordan stood beside U.S. Attorney Melanie Price, the lead prosecutor on the case. Flanked by community leaders and civil rights activists, she addressed the public not as a victim, but as a voice for change. "This isn't just about what happened to me," she said, her voice echoing over the crowd. "This is about what happens every day to people without a title, without a camera, without a courtroom that listens. Power unchecked becomes dangerous. But truth has a way of burning through the dark." Reporters shouted questions, but Jordan turned and walked away. Her message had landed. Behind the scenes, the reforms began. The police department was ordered to undergo mandatory federal oversight. A new civilian review board, diverse, transparent, and uncompromised, was formed to evaluate misconduct allegations. Internal hiring procedures were restructured to eliminate discriminatory screening. For the first time in decades, the city admitted its system was broken. And it was beginning to fix it. But perhaps the most powerful moment came weeks later when Jordan stood before a class of high school seniors at a public school in one of Atlanta's poorest districts. She had returned to speak, not as a billionaire or a victim, but as someone who still believed in the fight. "I've been underestimated, profiled, disrespected," she told them. "But I never forgot who I was, and I want you to remember who you are. You don't have to be rich to be powerful. You don't have to be famous to matter. You just have to stand up, especially when it's hardest." A hand went up. A girl no older than 16, with braids and a chipped notebook. "How do you stay strong when everyone wants to break you down?" Jordan smiled. Not the rehearsed corporate smile. A real one. "You remember what you're building, and you never, ever let them define your story." That night, back in her apartment overlooking the skyline, Jordan watched the city lights flicker like stubborn stars. Maya brought her tea, and they sat in silence, the hum of Atlanta beneath them. "You think it's over?" Maya asked. Jordan took a slow sip. "No, but now they know my name." She turned toward the window, and more importantly, now they know they can't erase it. To everyone listening, if Jordan's story moved you, if you believe in justice that doesn't wait for a badge, a title, or a miracle, then share this story. Let it travel further than her courtroom ever could. Because the next time someone's power is questioned because of their skin, their gender, or their silence, your voice might be what tips the scale. Thank you for watching. If this story meant something to you, like the video, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to know they're not alone. We'll see you in the next story, because the fight for truth isn't over. It's only just begun.